It took decades, but eventually, the silence gave way to truth. And when Lee Major finally spoke those long-held words aloud, it wasn't for the cameras, the magazines, or even the fans. It was for himself, for her, for the memory of a love that defined an era, shook a generation, and quietly haunted him long after the flashbulb stopped and the divorce papers yellowed with time. Because for years, people wondered, whispered, assumed, and speculated about what really happened between Lee Major and Farrah Fawcett, the golden couple of 1970s Hollywood, whose faces were as perfect as their love seemed fragile. And while the tabloids built empires off their rumored heartbreak, no one truly knew what went on behind those closed doors, except the two of them. And for the longest time, Lee said nothing, holding the truth like an ember in his chest, too sacred to expose, too painful to ignite. But now, with age softening his voice and legacy outweighing pride, he said it, and in doing so confirmed what many suspected all along, that even when their marriage ended, even when she left the home they once shared, even when the world saw them as history, he never stopped loving her, never stopped wondering what might have been, and that his silence all those years wasn't about bitterness or betrayal. It was about grief, about loss, about loving someone so completely that the words never seemed big enough to hold the truth. Because Farrah wasn't just his wife, she was his muse, his mystery, his moonlight, and to watch her rise beyond him, become the poster icon of a generation. The smile that sold 10 million copies in a single swimsuit, the angel that soared while he remained grounded in the grit of action roles and late-night reruns was both beautiful and brutal, because he was proud of her. Yes, fiercely proud. But he also awked in the quiet moments, knowing that their timing, their chemistry, their collision, had created something unforgettable but unsustainable, because Hollywood was never built for forever. And their love, as real and red-hot as it had been, was devoured by distance, by ambition, by fame's relentless spotlight. And yet beneath it all, there was a tenderness that never died. Not even when they stopped speaking. Not even when she took up with Ryan O'Neal. Not even when her life ended in tragedy, her brilliant light dimmed by the cruelty of illness. And through it all, Lee Major carried a silence that wasn't cold. It was protective, reverent, like someone guarding a sacred memory from a world too quick to twist it. And now, at last, in the twilight of his years, with his own mortality arresting against the edges of each new morning, he's allowed himself to speak of her not as a tabloid headline, not as a regret, but as the woman who, even in leaving him, never truly left his heart. And when he said it, when he finally admitted that he used to watch her from afar, flipping channels late at night, catching glimpses of her interviews, her appearances, her laughter, he said it with tears in his eyes, not because he was sad, but because he could finally say it out loud, that she was the one who got away, that he never stopped caring, that no matter what the world believed, he never blamed her for chasing her light. Because in truth, he always knew she was meant to shine beyond the boundaries of marriage, that her spirit was too wild, too beautiful, too bold to be contained. And though the end of their marriage came with pain, it also came with a strange kind of grace. Because even in parting, they never tried to destroy each other. They never poisoned the well of memory with public fights or cruel accusations. They simply stepped away quietly, respectfully, heartbreakingly, and in that silence lived a kind of love that never needed headlines to validate it. And as the years passed and the questions persisted, Lee held on to the best parts. The private parts, the laughter they shared in the early days before the world noticed. The nights on the couch watching old movies, the way she used to scrunch her nose when he tickled her, and when she died. When the news broke that Farrah Fawcett had passed after her long, courageous battle with cancer, he grieved not just as an ex-husband, but as someone who had loved her in ways the world could never measure. And maybe that's why, after all this time, when he finally confirmed what so many had always sensed, that his love for Farrah never truly faded, it didn't feel like a revelation, but a release, a sigh carried on the wind of years too long held in. Because sometimes love doesn't die, it just changes shape. And while he remarried and she moved on, there was always that tether, invisible but unbreakable. And in her final days, though they hadn't spoken in years, he thought of her, lit candles for her, sent prayers out into the silence, and wondered if she knew that, deep down beneath the layers of time and distance, she had never really left him. And now, as his own story wins toward its final chapter, Lee Major has given the world a rare glimpse into the truth of his heart, and in doing so has confirmed that behind every great Hollywood romance, there is a real human story, one of longing, of growth, of loss, of memory, and above all, of love that outlives the years and settles. Soft and eternal in the soul of a man who finally quietly just wanted the world to know what she meant to him. And in the stillness that followed his long overdue confession, the world seemed to pause with him, not to judge, not to dissect, but to listen, to hear what it sounds like when a man who once embodied strength, stoicism, and unshakable masculinity lays down the armor and speaks with the fragile honesty of someone who's carried the weight of memory longer than most people carry. their marriages, because when Lee Majors reflected not just on the woman Farrah was, but the woman he came to understand too late, there was no resentment, no bitterness, only a melancholy admiration for her spirit, her fight, and the way she kept evolving even after their paths had split. And what made his confession even more piercing was that it came not in the heat of youth, but in the mellowing autumn of a life filled with stories, where ego no longer holds the race and regret slips into every open space, with a softness that no longer burns, but hums. Because for all the world had said about Farrah Fawcett, about her iconic poster, her tumultuous romance with Ryan O'Neal, her quiet dignity in the face of cancer, but Lee saw was the woman behind it all. The one who curled up beside him on a Sunday morning with her hair a mess and no cameras in sight. The one who used to write little notes and leave them in his suit pockets before press events. The one who even in arguments never raised her voice, but let her eyes speak volumes. And when he remembers those eyes now, it's not with the possession of a man recalling a lost love, but with the reverence of someone who knows he had a rare gift in his hands. One he didn't quite know how to protect when it mattered most. And perhaps that's the part that has haunted him the longest. Not the loss, but the quiet realization that sometimes love needs more than just affection. It needs timing, patience, grace, and the humility to let someone grow, even if it means growing apart. And in Farrah's case, her need to grow was not a betrayal of Lee, but a reclamation of herself. Because too often women in Hollywood were boxed into images, into fantasies, into the projections of men who wanted them to stay golden and soft and unchallenging. But Farrah wanted more substance, more struggle, more room to make mistakes, and come back stronger. And while Lee admired that, in theory, living it alongside her proved harder than he had imagined. And as he watched her rise, fall, rise again, and fight for roles that didn't trade on her looks, but tested her talent, he found himself both inspired and intimidated. Because, in truth, Farrah didn't just break the mold, she shattered it, walking away from Charlie's Angels at the height of her fame, risking everything for a chance at artistic fulfillment. And when the critics mocked her for it, Lee watched with fury, helpless from the sidelines, wanting to defend her publicly, but restrained by the caution that fame teaches you early, that silence is safer than sincerity. But now, all these years later, he no longer cares about safe, and so he speaks. And when he does, his voice trembles slightly, not from weakness, but from the weight of remembering it all. The highs, the fights, their conciliations, the last time he saw her face to face, which he recalls with such vivid detail that even now retelling it, he can describe the blouse she wore, the way her perfume lingered after she left, the way she smiled, but with a sadness tucked behind it, as if even then she knew something he didn't. And maybe she did, because Farrah always seemed to carry a wisdom that ran deeper than the world gave her credit for. A kind of emotional intelligence that made her both resilient and sensitive. And when she became ill, when the cancer diagnosis turned from a headline into a countdown, Lee felt the familiar ache rise again, the kind that told him he had unfinished words inside him. And though they never had that final cathartic conversation, he found solace in the letters he never sent, the prayers he whispered into the dark, the dreams in which she still appeared, sometimes silent, sometimes laughing, but always radiant. And when she passed, when the world mourned and television specials ran tributes in her honor, Lee stayed, mostly out of the spotlight, not because he didn't grieve, but because he did, privately, deeply, without the need for spectacle. And in the years that followed, as people continued to speculate about what really happened between them, he stayed, silent, not to be mysterious, but to be respectful, to honor the quiet truth that not all love sank